I cannot see. I don't know. Is everything good? Okay, no problem. All right, before we begin, I actually want to promote Dr. Daniel's book for those of you who were here previously for the panel that we just had with Black researchers, perspectives on researching and writing while Black. Dr. Maurice Daniels, he's selling some of his books outside. I've just brought one here. There's a second one that's out there as well, which is, of course, by, well, here's the cover. Horace T. Ward is the subject, and it is called Desegregation of the University of Georgia, Civil Rights Advocacy and Jurisprudence. So that is outside of the table. He does take, I think, Cash App. He's got a QR code, so you all see it before you all leave. And there's a second one that's also out there too. So are we ready? Okay, very good. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're so glad you are here out. I mean, it could have been colder, it could have been rainier, but the fact that you're still here after dark is impressive. So we thank you for coming out. My name is Ms. Bean, program manager here, and we're here with the rest of our staff. And I think we should probably wave. We have, of course, Ms. Tamika Strong. Who else is here from staff? They're probably out on the desk. John Alston was here. Is he still here? Hey, you still wave? Okay, Derek Mosley. Okay, there we go. Priscilla Dickerson. There she is. And of course, Mr. Victor. Victor Simmons. Connie Freitman is here. Yay. So we appreciate you all being here, and we have other staff that's not recognized, but they have done the work to, whether that is putting up the exhibits, putting up the flyers, and passing the word around. We're just excited that you all have taken note of what we're doing here at Auburn Ave this season. So, before we start with Dr. Skip Mason, we want to, of course, have to open up, and as we typically do, I'm going to say Black folk do, we open up with song. Do we not? Okay, because you got to bring spirits in. And in this case, we are to do our National Black Anthem, but we're going to have a team to open this up for us. She is here in Atlanta. She just got back, and I say just got back. We'll say in July, she said, the World Choral Competition, I believe. The World Choir Games. I didn't know there was such a thing. But the World Choir Games in New Zealand. Now, I didn't ask her if they placed, but the fact that you got on the plane and was invited to come is impressive enough. So, Miss Bailey Mines, who is, I believe, 17? Yes, she is. She's going to come to stage and give us an a cappella version of the National Black Anthem. Now, I know not everybody knows all three verses, so I'm going to save you, and we'll come in at the chorus at the very end, so we won't embarrass you. You don't have to mumble the words. But she's here with sound voice, sound mind to welcome us with our National Black Anthem. Let's give a hand to Miss Mines.
Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with the steady beat have not our weary feet come to a place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading a path through the blood of the slaughtered, out from a gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee, shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land.
Okay, let's give another hand for her. It's amazing to see young people doing amazing things. I've never been to New Zealand. I don't know how many of you have, but still amazing. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this momentous occasion as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Auburn Avenue Research Library. I am the library administrator here. My name is Victor Simmons, Jr. For 3 decades, this esteemed institution has been a beacon of knowledge. Tonight we gather not only to honor this milestone, but also to embark on a journey of discovery and dialogue through the Collecting, Researching, and Writing While Black Conference. The Auburn Avenue Research Library has been dedicated to preserving the rich tapestry of African American experiences. It has provided a space for scholars, students, and the public to explore the depths of our history and the breadth of our cultural contributions. As we celebrate 30 years, we also look forward to the future. where the library will continue to inspire and educate generations to come. This conference is a testament to the library's ongoing commitment to fostering a deeper understanding of the Black experience. Over the next 3 days, well, we will have another 3 decades though. We will engage with scholars and community leaders who are at the forefront of preserving and interpreting our stories. For sessions on collecting for hip hop, to discussions about the role of the Black-owned bookstores, this conference promises to be a rich and enlightening experience for all. I want to tell you before I go on to introducing Brother Skip Mason, please take the time out and go into our large gallery space right when you leave here. We have an amazing collection highlighting some of the artwork from our actual collection. Everything that you see out here on the first floor is from our collection, whether it is in the children's gallery, whether it's in those vitrines. Please take a moment to take that in. That's just a small percentage of what it is that we have in this building, and I don't want you to miss out on the opportunity to take some of that stuff in. It is my great honor to introduce our opening keynote speaker for the Annie L. McPheeters Lecture Series, the Reverend Dr. Herman Skip Mason. Dr. Mason is a distinguished historian, educator, and pastor. Born in Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. Mason graduated from Morris Brown College with a BA in Communications and History, and later earned a master's in Library and Information Science from Clark Atlanta University. Dr. Mason has served in various educational roles, including as a professor, archivist, and dean at Morris Brown College and Morehouse College. He is also the senior pastor of historic West Mitchell Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, I need to slow down, and is the current interim president of the Interdenominational Theological Center, ITC. Dr. Mason has authored numerous books on African American history and curated significant exhibitions during his career. Please join me in welcoming the Reverend Dr. Herman Skip Mason.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Let me say what a joy it is to be here at the Auburn Avenue Research Library. And even more so that you thought enough to stay and remain. I understand that it has been a day long full of wonderful presentations and activities. And I really wish that I could have been here to share in these wonderful presentations, which I hope will inspire. But Administrator Simmons, thank you, and to your wonderful staff and team here at the Auburn Avenue Research Library. A few months ago, I received a text from my dear friend and sister Gloria Strong with a mandate that I was encouraged to consider coming and being a part of this, and my fraternity brother, Mr. Mosley, had insisted. I'm honored. It has been 20 years since I've been invited to say a word in this library. A lot has happened during that time. In fact, I know it's been 20 years because I found some video footage of that presentation, Sharon, which was up on the second floor, and my daughter was about 3 or 4 months, and now she's 23 years old. So I know it's been a long time. I'm glad to be here, glad to share, glad to reminisce a little bit about my memories and recollections of the Black Studies collection before Auburn Avenue. There are some wonderful people here who I work with. I saw Janice Seitz earlier. Is she still here? Let me ask Janice White Seitz to stand for just a moment, because so much of what I am, so much of who I am. In 1986, I went into the Atlanta Fulton Public Library with the box of photos that I had collected. I was broke. I was trying to sell my pictures to the library. I understood that they were collecting material on African American history in Atlanta, and I had been collecting for many years. Well, I walked out of the library with a job as a library assistant. To this day, Janice never purchased the box of pictures that I went in to sell. They're still for sale. But that began a wonderful journey and career. I did not imagine that I would go into library services, Otis. I had other ambitions. I loved history, but library was far from my purview, even though my beloved cousin / aunt was the dean of the library school at Atlanta University, Dr. Lorene Byron Brown. And Lorene would invite me. She said, you need to come get a library degree. And I would carry on. I said, do I look like a librarian? I have no plans to be a librarian. And I remember eating humble pie when I got my job at the library, started working at the library, and then realized after Casper Jordan pinned me up in his office that I needed to get a master's in library science. And so I went humbly to my cousin Lorene and said, I think I want to enroll in school. And I did, and it was a great experience, and it opened up a wide avenue of other possibilities. I want to talk a few minutes about what it was like before this beautiful building, these fancy curtains and screens, wonderful exhibit and display halls in this building, great repository for the history of Atlanta and African Americans. There was on Central downtown, the Central building, AFPL, a 5th floor. The 5th floor is where the Black Studies collection was located. The collection had been named for Samuel Williams, who was a distinguished pastor of Friendship Baptist Church and a prominent professor at Morehouse College. And ironically, he married my mother and father in 1956. And so I was introduced to the Black Studies collection, and my job as a library assistant at that time was to familiarize myself with the collection. Some of you all are old enough to remember the Dewey Decimal System and the Library of Congress system. I had to familiarize myself with the files, and there working in the library, we had the wonderful Miss Joyce Jeltz. Joyce is here. Where are you, Joyce? Would you stand and so you can be recognized? Another one of my wonderful mentors. And so I was surrounded by Janice and Joyce, and Janice, I'm trying to think of the little sweet white lady. Was that Miss Sarah? Miss Alexander. So Miss Alexander was a librarian, and she managed the Georgia collection. And you were sure not to make sure that any of those files were out of place, because she would really let you have it in her own way. But what a wonderful experience to be a part, not only of the Black Studies collection, but to be a part of the Atlanta Fulton Public Library as well, the staff. We were a wonderful family, if I could say that. We all knew each other on each floor. Of course, Gloria was running human resources. She wasn't the director, but she was running human resources. And we just had a great time. Our floor was located near processing, where they used to catalog and process books. On Fridays, it would be my responsibility to collect money, $5, and take orders and go over to the Bankhead Fish House. I kid you not. On most Fridays, I would get in my car and go over, and I collected enough money that I could get my fish free for lunch and dinner, both Friday and Saturday. That was a wonderful time. And what I'm trying to say to you is that part of what we do as a people is that we share stories, memories, we recollect. And now we collect these oral histories so that years from now, when we are no longer here, someone will have the opportunity to hear and to see and to read. As I said, I didn't grow up wanting to be a librarian at all. In fact, I really didn't know what I wanted to be. I thought I wanted to be a fireman until I was striking matches at home when I was a kid. And I burned a hole in the carpet and got the worst whipping of my life. So fireman was out of the picture. I thought I wanted to be a mortician, an undertaker. In fact, I did an intern in high school at Alfonso Dawson, a funeral home. And so the Lord was shaping me and giving me some direction. It wasn't until 1977, January, a week in January, when Alex Haley's epic miniseries Roots aired. How many of you in here are old enough to remember January of 1977 and what an impact that it had in our lives? Something changed in me. Something stirred up in my spirit and in my soul that wanted and created the opportunity for me to learn more about my family. But not just about my family, but to collect images and pictures and documents. My mom said I was always a saver of things. I had an old suitcase where I would put my baseball cards, where I would put letters that I had received from my father who lived in Detroit, Michigan, where I would put my Right On magazines. Anybody remember Right On magazines? That was a magazine back in the day. My comic books, my Archie comic books. I loved Archie comic books. And so in my own way, I was a collector. My room, my small room where we lived, I had pictures on the wall. I had my share of blacklight posters. I had photos on the wall. I had my certificates. So I was in my own little way becoming my own personal exhibit curator without even knowing what a curator was. And creating my space and understanding the value and the importance of collecting and recognizing that it is important. What you do here at the Auburn Avenue Research Library is important. It is vital. It is necessary that we have a repository that collects, preserves, and tells the story of our people. And given the political climate that we're in now and going into, a place like Auburn Avenue becomes even more important and more valuable. But I want to talk a little bit about your own personal collection and the value that you have placed in collecting and saving those things that are important to you. Ultimately, as I worked at the library and became the library assistant and eventually graduating from AU in the last class of Atlanta University Library School, not the library school, but the last class of AU, and getting my library degree, and becoming the Black Studies librarian for Auburn Avenue, for the Atlanta Fulton Public Library, then I began to expand. There was conversation and talk about creating a separate facility that will house the history and preserve and collect the story of Black Atlanta and African Americans in Atlanta. But as you know, in county governments, everything is political. And I mean, it was a fight. It was constant going back and forth. And you had a short little woman by the name of Alice Washington, who was on the board of the library, who was really championing the cause. You had Fulton County commissioners who all wanted a say in how this library would be set up. The Fulton County Commission Chair, Michael Lomax, at the time, was an avid collector himself. And so he took great interest in wanting to be an integral part of this story. Eventually, my role expanded as Janice and Sharon and Joyce would know. And by the way, I remember the day when Sharon got off the elevator looking for a job and asking to see the manager, the director, which at that time was Janice Sykes. I remember that day clearly, and it has been a joy to watch her and her family. Let me also call out the name of Gloria Mims. Wherever Gloria Mims is now, I want to lift her name because she too was very much an integral part of that family that we created on the 5th floor of the library. And so my job was to go out and to identify persons and families and individuals that might be willing to donate their collection to the library. And so I began to pull together what I call the dog and pony show. I began to gather material from the archives and some of the things that we already had, and to make a compelling case as to why they should donate to the Black Studies collection, which would eventually become the Auburn Avenue Research Library. One of my very first visits was to Mrs. Annie Lou Waddell McPheeters, having the honor of sitting at her dining room table with papers and books all around her room, and photos and art. What a magnificent, very soft-spoken. She was the dean of Black librarians in Atlanta. The Auburn Avenue Library, which was originally on Auburn Avenue in the old Carnegie building, the West Hunter Street Library that I patronized when I was a kid, because we lived right up the street on Chapel Road before it moved down to Central. But to sit in her presence and to hear her talk about the evolution was just an absolute honor. And so she was one of the first collections, her collection was one of the first collections that we would procure and secure for the Auburn Avenue Library. My strategy was pretty simple: to go after and to talk with people that I knew and knew well. Some of those persons included the late, great Chico Renfro. Chico Renfro was a sports journalist and an announcer, and he had quite a collection of scrapbooks that he had kept over the years documenting athletic events, sports events in Atlanta. And so we were able to get him. Now, let me back up a little, because I don't know how things are now. When I was going after collections, we had a few dollars that we could offer them. So we were able to say, we are interested in your collection, and let's talk some numbers. I tell you, people respond differently when you say we are interested in acquiring and purchasing your collection, as just opposed to donating. But many people just simply donate the collection because they realize the value and the importance, and they realize that the collection needs a home. So Chico Renfro's collection became a part of the library. It was a great collection, and it was especially great in documenting the history of African American sports in Atlanta. Another person that I approached was a photographer by the name of Herman Perry. Herman Perry was a stringer photographer for Atlanta and for Jet and Ebony magazine. Back in the day when Ebony and Jet was the magazine. In fact, Joyce and Janice and Sharon will probably agree with me that so many of our brothers and sisters who came to the fifth floor, all they wanted to see was the Jet book and Ebony magazine. Mind you, this was before cell phones. It was before iPads. It was before social media. If we wanted to know what was going on in Black America, you went to Jet first. If you wanted to know what were the top 20 hit songs, you went to Jet magazine. And if you just wanted to see a young lady in a bikini, you went to Jet magazine. I can see so many of our brothers coming off the street now asking for Jet, turning straight to the centerfold. But Mr. Perry was a photographer. And so for years, he took pictures for Jet and would send them in. And so if you do a Google search of Herman Perry or go to Google Books and put Perry in, you'll see his name and many of his great images. But he also took a lot of pictures of Atlanta as well. And he had a small collection of negatives that we were able to purchase and acquire for the collection. And he was extremely happy about that. I think perhaps one of the two collections I want to talk about for just a moment. The first one is the collection that belonged to the family of E.R. Carter. Now, those of you who are from Atlanta or been in Atlanta for a while know that Reverend E.R. Carter was the second pastor of Friendship Baptist Church. He was the chair of the board of Morehouse for many years. He wrote the first authentic and official publication for Atlanta called The Black Side. I mean, it was the eminent publication that documented black folks in Atlanta. And his grandson, Andrew J. Lewis, was a friend and fraternity brother, much older man, but he had an incredible collection at his home, Brother Otis. And so I talked Brother Lewis into donating the collection to the library, and it was a magnificent collection of memorabilia documenting Morehouse, documenting Black Atlanta, Spelman, Friendship Baptist Church. But I think perhaps the biggest find for me as a Black Studies librarian and doing the Dog and Pony Show was discovering the collection of a Black photographer out of Jacksonville, Florida, by the name of Ellie Weems. So, oh yeah, let's give Ellie Weems some love. So, we had Janice Sykes knew everybody, let me say that. One day I'm sitting at the desk, true story, little short guy with big glasses gets off the elevator passing out brochures. He said, "Is Janice in?" I said, "Yes. What's your name?" So I can let her know. She said, "Tell her Spike Lee is here." Spike Lee was in town getting ready to film School Days. And so he brought a slew of flyers up. Nobody knew Spike, at the time, but he was a good friend of Janice and then her late husband, Dan. And so he came, Monty Ross, who produced the movie as well. So all of these folks would come. There was another collector by the name of David McLeod, a Caucasian gentleman, and we used to do some work with him. But he said that there was a collection in a cold, dark basement of over 10,000 negatives that documented the African American experience in Jacksonville, Florida. Well, I knew about Weems because my mother and father were born in Jacksonville. And we had some Weems pictures in our collection. And true enough, David and I, we rode out to this house, went down into the basement, and there were boxes and boxes and boxes of negatives in Kodak boxes. And we were able to acquire and purchase that magnificent collection, which I think is one of the most incredible collection and images. I mean, Weems was on the same level as Polk out of Alabama and Vanderzee out of New York, documenting the African American experience from the 1920s on up. And so those are just a few of the collections that I was able to manage to help to bring in that would really set the framework for additional seeking out of collections from individuals not only in Atlanta but throughout Georgia. And so it is amazing to see out of that small group what this collection has become. I would get called on at any time from Casper Jordan to Ron Dubberly, who was the director of the library at the time, or any one of the commissioners who was trying to make a case that we need to have this library. And I'm so glad that after wrangling through all of the politics during that time, that this library stands as a testament. And so, I'm glad to see that as you celebrate 30 years of collecting and researching and writing, that you are keen on making sure that people are aware of what you have and what you do. These programs are important. Workshops are important. Books are written, compiled, because people have an interest. They come in, they do research, they look for articles. It's amazing now that things that we had to find on microfilm. Any of y'all remember microfilm? Anybody remember having to find the roll of the Atlanta Daily World and then putting it on the spin, the wheel, and sliding it up under and cranking and turning and looking for that. Now you can find most of this online. We have come a long way. And it is important because some of the best books are yet to be written. All of Atlanta's history has not yet been uncovered or written about. There are some great novels that are in the minds and thoughts of people in this room and in this community. There are great exhibits yet to be shown. A few years ago, and I'm going to put this PowerPoint up and see if I can get it to come up. I have always enjoyed collecting. It's in my DNA. It's in my blood. I think it's important. I will drive down a street. I don't do it much now, but back in the day, if I saw boxes or things on the sidewalk that had been put out, I'd make a U-turn, pull up. I could be coming from church in my suit and would pull up and start rambling and going through boxes. Because what it said to me that somebody, unfortunately, did not know or value the importance of some of the items that they have put out on the street. Pieces of furniture that you would find. People, family members who did not know or think to make sure that what you have spent so many years collecting, what you have poured your heart into to save, that somebody in your family will know and understand, when I go, do not throw this away. But when you say do not throw it away, then the question is, well, what am I going to do with it? And where will it go? And so maybe about 3 years ago, my daughter insisted that I go to an exhibit at the High Museum. Now, I told Jill, I've curated many exhibits before, baby. I know a little bit something about exhibits. Now, she said, Daddy, you got to go to this exhibit and see it. It's amazing. And so I did go. And I was inspired by Virgil Abloh, his exhibit at the High. Did any of you get to see that exhibit when it was here? So let me suggest to you that you go to the High Museum and see the Alicia Keys Swiss Beats exhibit. Have any of you seen that one yet? It is an amazing exhibit at the High. Because these exhibits, the ones that you have here at the Auburn Avenue Library and around, help to inspire you, and then you have that light bulb moment. And with Virgil Abloh, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, I had a light bulb moment. So for over 40 years, I've been collecting African-American memorabilia that vividly captures Atlanta and the African-American experience, which has been embellished through music, theater, movie, arts, politics, and social commentary. From street posters to theater lobby cards to movie one-sheets to political campaign signage, oil paintings, artifacts, to convey simply the message of our existence. That's what Auburn Avenue does. That's what the Avery Center does. That's what the Schomburg Center, the Smithsonian Museum of African American History, all to give credence to our existence and to celebrate our culture. So I was inspired by the Virgil Abloh exhibit to create and conceive a concept called For the Culture, to remind viewers of what we do, what we have done, and what we hope to do to preserve the beauty and diversity of our race. So I knew very little about Abloh, as I said, until driving by, and my daughter saw the banner and told me who he was. I came back to see the exhibit, and it was there that I was inspired to revisit my collection, my own personal collection, and aspire to share for the culture. Now, brace yourselves for the next slide. And I say that because I am an archivist. and this is my collection. It's funny how you spend time arranging and preserving other folks' collections. And this is how your own collection looks. So this is my garage. And this is one of my storage units that I have. If I think about it, I'll get upset that I've been paying a storage fee for over 12 years. But there are things in there that are very special and valuable to me. That's why I think it was just divine that I was driving up Peachtree and I saw the banner with Abloh's exhibit, and I was inspired to revisit my own collection. I've written books on the history of black folks in Atlanta, a number of books, and I've had some exhibits. But there was a period of time that I was constantly collecting. Now, how many of you watch the show Hoarders? I'm not a hoarder. This is in my garage. My living space is clean. I can move around. I can see things. I may have hoarder tendencies, but I'm not a hoarder. At least that's what I've convinced myself. For the culture, celebrating our ancestors. I believe that everybody ought to have somewhere in their space some photos of their ancestors, those with whom we descend from, those with whom their DNA is inside of us. Because on their faces are the faces of survivors, people who survived so that we could be here today. I wish that these pictures could talk. But let me tell you a story about these pictures. I have no idea who they are. These are photos, just a small sampling of pictures that I collected at flea markets, at sales, on the street, going into garage sales, and people had these beautiful photos of ancestors with no names or identity. And so they are in my home. Many of them are placed on the walls around because I want to honor them. They are somebody's ancestors, and we want to honor them. And so when we think about culture and collecting, we begin with the thought about our ancestors. Now, this is in my home. I have a love and a passion for theater. My kids always call me dramatic anyway, but I grew up wanting to be an actor, wanting to perform on stage and in theater, but really did not have the confidence to do it. And when I studied it in college, my drama professor said, "You have some good skills, but your accent is too southern, too much of a twang, and you won't go very far with that." And that deflated every aspect of my wanting to go into theater. But it didn't stop my love for theater. And I said, well, if I can't be on stage, at least I can collect. At least I can travel and go to Broadway and catch all of the wonderful shows, the Jumondy Theater production and all. And I was going through my collection and realized that I had a ton of Jumondy. Any of you all remember Jumondy Theater? I have to remember, everybody is not a native of Atlanta. And that's so unfortunate. But we love you anyway. But to be able to collect and to display many of the posters that creates conversation, that celebrates our gifts and our magnificent and wonderful talents. I just returned from New York this past weekend because the New York City Center had this magnificent production of Ragtime. Any of you familiar with Ragtime? Magnificent, and I got a chance to go up and see that. For the culture, album art. Some years ago, I began to write letters to my mother's friends and say, do you have any old albums that you're not using? I probably end up with about 5,000 to 6,000 albums. I mean, they said, please hurry and come get them now. That's how fast they were wanting to get rid of the albums, because we were no longer playing albums. We had moved to CDs, you know, and now albums have sort of made a small return. But I wanted to collect albums, one, because of the beautiful music, but the beautiful artwork on the cover of the albums. And so this is my collection of album covers from the Supremes, which was my favorite group growing up, Motown group growing up. And so I was able to complete a collection of that. Movie posters. So some years ago, I started collecting movie posters because there's beautiful art in those movie posters. And they were used to market and draw and entice us to come into the movie house to see some of the great movies. I used to be an avid watcher of Turner Classic Movies until they start charging a subscription. And so I found a way to watch my classic movies without paying that subscription. But the beauty of black movies during that period of time and the wonderful collecting of that, as we go through different genres and time periods from the 50s, 60s, and 70s and 80s. And this is my signed Spike Lee poster. Let me let you in on a little story. I told you Spike was a good friend of Janice. Some years ago, I did an exhibit at the Robert W. Woodruff Library, Otis, on Ada Lambda chapter. Spike was in the library. He saw the exhibit. He saw the pictures. He wanted to know who did this, because I need some help in creating an opening montage for a movie that I'm working on. So I received a call from Spike and Monty and some producers. They said they're trying to put something together that will demonstrate the history of black folks while the Morehouse Glee Club is singing. And so I said, well, what are they singing? They're going to be singing a song called I'm Building Me a Home. And the images should tell the story of black life, particularly collegiate life from that. And so I pulled together some images, and they liked them, and I got a big old fat check for $250. But even more so, I got screen credit. So I want y'all to go home tonight, find me in school days. And then wait for the credit, and you'll see my name skip. I can't tell you how many times I sat in the movie theater during the time this thing came out. Just an absolute profound awe that my name was in the credit. And then my dear friend again, Janice, who had a dear friend named Tracy, who worked for Spike Lee. She was Spike's assistant. She made sure that Spike signed my movie poster. The Josephine Baker story. Now, let me talk a little bit about collecting hip hop. So 35, 40 years ago, Atlanta, like many cities, would always plaster on telephone poles posters. Coming at shows, at the clubs, albums that were going to be released. In fact, if you look at some of these, you'll see you can see where some of it's torn, because I will pull them off of the posters. So I have about 30 years of posters documenting the history of music and hip hop in our city. And these are just a few of the posters, just stacks of them. There was a printing company here in Atlanta on Edgewood that used to print up all of the posters. So that's how people advertise shows. You know, now everything is a text, okay? It's on social media. But when you saw something plastered up on the wall, then you would certainly go. And even today, I still will stop. If I see something on a pole, I'll get out, I'll put my dark shades on, because I am a pastor now. And I don't want anybody to say, is Skip Mason all right? I saw him out on a pole pulling posters. And so, yes, this recent election, I got everything I could on Kamala Harris and other African American candidates. That's how we build. That's how we build collections. Okay. A few more from the collection. They don't, but a good Google search, and what I started doing was putting the years on the back that particular album came out, and trying to find a particular show as well. And so collecting for the culture of black entertainment, the Auburn Avenue Casino, which was located right across from the Royal Peacock, which many of you all are familiar with as well. Collecting campaign posters, easy to collect. Every time we have a campaign, you know they're going to plaster the walls, the poles and areas with campaign posters. And so when you are in tune with what you want to collect, everything becomes important, even if it may not seem significant at the time that you are collecting. And so I wanted to just kind of walk you through and share some of my own personal collecting to encourage you to continue to collect, to encourage you to value that which you have collected, whatever it is, be it art, books, or photos. And then the most important thing, which is what I'm doing now, is trying to decide and determine what will happen to my collection and where will my collection go. Because my kids, bless their sweethearts, they have too much to try to figure that piece out. And the way Auburn Avenue has built its collection is that people who have donated were in tune and sensitive to the fact that what they have may be important, number one. And the importance of what you have may not be determined until some years later when somebody comes into the library and says, I'm trying to find some information on a particular theater. I'm trying to find information about my ancestor who attended Morris Brown College or Morehouse College or Spelman College. And I want us to start thinking, not only do we collect posters and photos, ephemera, costumes, clothing items that are significant to you would be significant to others. And as Auburn Avenue continues its celebration of 30 years of being a special library on African American culture and history, I pray that it will continue to fulfill its mission. I pray that more great collections will come its way. And I am considering Auburn Avenue for my collection. But I'm kind of like Chico Renfro. 30 years ago, Skip, are there any funds for this collection? That was a joke, y'all. No, I'm serious as a bed bug. Listen, thank you for your time. Continue to collect. Continue to ensure the posterity of our history. They tell me that in certain states now they're starting to pull books from libraries. They're pulling books, certain books by African Americans. And so be in mind, be in tune, be engaged, and certainly value this wonderful thing we call African American history. And by all and for all sakes, let's do it for the culture. Thank you very much for your time. I'll entertain a question or two if there be any. Otherwise, yes. Hey, Dr. Lockett, good to see you, my friend.
Thank you for your presentation today. It reminded me so much of, I grew up in Houston, Texas.
Yes.
With all the stars come, we used to see all those posters.
Right.
You took me back almost 50 years ago. But I just want to just talk about one person in particular that I think was significant to this library, Julie Hunter.
Yes.
I think she was the first, was she the first, what is Janice? Janice, was she the first director of, oh yeah, well, anyway,
Thank you for calling her name. Absolutely. Thank you.
she was my neighbor.
Yes.
But I knew, and I worked at the library, Robert Douglas Woodruff Library when it first opened.
Right.
So, and she was the deputy director, but she also became the director.
We knew and loved Julie very much, and so thank you for reminding us to remember her in this setting. Miss Janice. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to talk just a minute about how you found out about what became the Montgomery Collection. And also, on a very personal note, you married me and Pastor Will Rock.
I sure did. Way up in a mountain about 3 hours away, somewhere where waterfalls were flowing. Yet another collection, I forgot about that one, the J. Neil Montgomery collection. J. Neil Montgomery was an impresario and promoter of events at the old City Auditorium. Some of you all remember the City Auditorium. It's where we had your major concerts and events. It's where the debutante ball took place. The facade of the building is still standing. It's a part of Georgia State University now. It has another name. I think the lobby and atrium area is still there, but the auditorium was torn down. But J. Neil Montgomery, like B.B. Beeman, brought in all of the major acts in Atlanta. And we were able to get the J. Neil Montgomery collection that had photos of all of the major entertainers from the 30s and 40s and 50s that came and performed at the City Auditorium, at the Magnolia Ballroom, which was in Vine City, at the Royal Peacock and the Auburn Avenue Casino. But he worked with various agencies that managed these acts, from Ella Fitzgerald to Count Basie, to Duke Ellington, to Dizzy Gillespie, just an amazing collection of stills and images. So one of the things that we were trying to do even then, was to broaden the expanse of the collection. While we wanted to collect Atlanta, we also wanted to make sure that this would be representative of not only Atlanta, but African Americans in the South. Not just the old Fourth Ward community, but all of Atlanta. Because if you talk about the history of Atlanta, the genesis of Atlanta, black folks began right up on the grounds of the state capitol. And that's where folks were staying in tents. And they created a community, and they called it Shermantown, named after General William Tecumseh Sherman. Of course, you all know what he did. He came through with his troops and burned a great deal of Atlanta down, which, of course, became the old underground Atlanta. The residents of Shermantown relocated southward to a community that would eventually be called Baileyville. And Lottie Bailey, who was a great granddaughter of the founder of that, shared that story with us. And they later changed the name to Summerhill. So Summerhill became the first community of African Americans, and then we see a shift over to what is now Fourth Ward. And so the area up where Martin Luther King Jr. stayed, that was primarily occupied by Jews who lived in that area before black folks began to move over to the Fourth Ward. In 1917, there was a great fire. There was a fire at a mattress company somewhere over near Edgewood. And that fire swept through much of the old Fourth Ward, down Boulevard, and it just burned houses and buildings. And black folks in the city were displaced. And many of the black folks living in the Fourth Ward end up moving on the west side of town, okay? One, because there was a man by the name of Alonzo Franklin Herndon, who had come up from Social Circle, Georgia, who was a barber and began to buy property and build small houses. And so because there were homes on the west side of Atlanta, black folks began to move to that area, which then began to populate the west side. The area is known as Vine City, Atlanta University. And so that's why the city council in 1924 found land off of Hunter Street to build its first high school, Booker T. Washington High School, which celebrated its centennial this year, 100 years ago. And so you see the pattern of movement. And black folks in Atlanta were pretty concentrated in a certain area. W.E.B. Du Bois lived in faculty housing on what is now Morris Brown's campus. It was the Atlanta University Center. Morris Brown was located on Boulevard at the time, and then in 1929 it came over. AU moved into the little area that we know now as Clark, Atlanta, because the great John Hope, president of Morehouse, wanted to build this great university. And so everything is just real connected, to one another as we look at our history. Even pockets out in Buckhead, the Buckhead community. Du Bois writes and talks about how some prominent black Atlantans had to take horse and buggies to that area to get away from the race riot of 1906. And so Atlanta's history is rich. 12 years ago, one day I decided, when Facebook was still kind of new, when Facebook was still clean and not mean-spirited, as it can be sometimes. It's a lot on Facebook right now. Some days I just have to shut Facebook off. I created a page of pictures called Vanishing Black Atlanta. I didn't think much of it. I just had some pictures. I said, okay, let me scan them and put them up. And I was amazed that I would put a picture up and people were commenting. I put a picture of the Royal Peacock and some people commented. I sang at the Royal Peacock. My mama used to be a waitress at the Royal Peacock. And then they would post pictures of their parents inside of the Royal Peacock. At that time, they had a photographer by the name of Count Jackson. Anybody remember Count Jackson? Count Jackson was one of those photographers that would go around from table to table and take pictures, with your pint of scotch and your Dixie cup glasses on the table, but entertainers and all of that kind of thing. But I created the Vanishing Black Atlanta because social media at that time and Facebook created a great opportunity for collecting stories and oral history. And so during the pandemic, when I decided to create a book club, one of the wonderful members on that page, Priscilla Dickerson, reached out to me. And she said, the Auburn Avenue Library would like to partner with you on your book club. For a whole year or so, we had book club discussions. We had authors. Is Priscilla still here? We had authors who would come and appear using social media, using Zoom, and reconnecting everybody to the richness, of our story. And so I don't know how I said all of that when Janice only asked me about J. Neil Montgomery. That's one story begets another. And it flows into that. And that is really the richness of our people, of our legacy, of our culture. And then the last thing I got to say, because this really connects it all for me. When I was in college, and after my love and thirst and interest for family history, an organization was created called the African American Family History Association. And it was, you remember that? Tell me your name. Jackie. Yes, Jackie. Good to see you. I saw you early and I recognized the face but didn't know the name. Joyce was the president of it. Janice was a member of it. It was a wonderful group. The organization did a couple of major exhibitions, one at the Atlanta Fulton Public Library, one at the Woodruff Library. So there's still many stories to tell, and I'm grateful for Auburn Avenue Administrator Simmons for the great work that you all are doing. The renovation of this building is fantastic, and I look back to coming back and exploring some of the great collections and exhibits that you all have. It is now 8 o'clock. It is time for me to conclude. Thank you again for your patience and for your time. Thank you.